Greetings, and welcome to another edition of Todd Talk, where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. The topic for today's Todd Talk is going to be creating an environment in your classroom where reflection is part of the norm. In our educational system, the way the traditional classroom works is students are given information or a skill or something of that nature. They're given the opportunity to practice this skill or content, and then they are assessed on whether they have learned this skill or content. And then that's usually where it stops. But there's another layer to this, and the other layer is the idea of doing reflection. So what reflection looks like is, what did the student truly learn from what it is that you asked them to do? So you have certain skills, you have certain content that are your learning objectives that you want students to be able to have demonstrated mastery of. But there's also what they learn, and this is kind of the most important aspect of learning, is what are they getting from something, because it may not be what you think they're getting, or it may be something that's a little more metacognitive, or they're learning something about themselves, which can be equally important. So what I'm going to be talking about are some different strategies that you can do in your classroom to make reflection just a normal part of the learning environment, where students are constantly reflecting to the point where they get pretty good at doing it without needing you to prompt them. But before we get to that point, we do need to set up structure so that students know what reflection looks like, what's expected, what an exemplary version of this is, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to give you 4 different ways that you can create learning reflection in your classroom. So the first one is simply through the use of a prompt. So a prompt is merely a question designed to prompt further discussion. So you have to be careful with your prompt. Your prompt has to be written in a way where you are not just asking a lower level question that can be answered with 1 or 2 words. It has to be a question that is going to elicit more response. So for instance, you could simply ask the prompt, what did you learn? And a student could say nothing and have been done. Or they could say, I learned about the states, or something of that nature. So that prompt is not going to elicit a long response, but you can set the prompt up a little bit differently to where you maybe will get a longer response, where you would say, what did you learn in this activity that you didn't think you would learn? That would be a different type of question, where kids would have to really think about what it is that they learned and that they didn't think they already knew, and what that meant to them. Here is an example of 35 different prompts that you can use with students, and they're broken down into relationships and collaboration. So something like, why is it important for students in a school to have positive relationships with each other, especially if they've been doing group work? Community and citizenship might be a question of what are some positive ways you could talk to adults about these problems and solutions. So if you're talking about a problem that's affecting the community, getting them to think about that. Academic performance, so what did they learn? What did they get out of it? What are some things that they really did well on the assignment? And then future and goal setting, which would be, what would you like to learn more about? Or how can you take it this step further and say, what are your dreams, and see what a student really is thinking with this. So these are examples of prompts that you can use. You don't have to use already pre-made prompts. You can also take a look at making your own, and how you want to go about doing that is just like anything, is you want to make sure that these prompts are written at a higher level of thinking, and that way this higher level of thinking is going to elicit more response. So for instance, if you look at this taxonomy of reflection, you see that if you ask a what did I do type of question, it's a recall question. You're going to get a basic response, 1 sentence or whatever. But if you take it a step further and ask them, where could you use this again in the applying part, then they're really thinking about not only what they did, but what they could do towards the future, or what's the importance of this. It's important for students to understand the context of what it is that they're learning, because if they don't understand the context, then they're just going to forget what it is that they learned, because there's no reason to hold on to it. You could take it a step further and ask them to evaluate. So how well did they do? So have them reflect, are there things they did well, things they could have done better? Did they learn things from other people that could have picked up? And then this creating actually fits into that applying as well, as what should I do next? So moving forward with what you have learned, how are you going to be able to use this effectively in your future endeavors in education. Part of this also is the idea of looking at a protocol with this. So the Ripet cubed reflection, as you see here, is an example of how you could scaffold questions that lead them up. So you could ask several questions that lead up to the higher level. So the R is the remembering. People are just describing what they did. I is identifying what was important. So what was the main lesson that they were supposed to get from that. P, the first P is putting it together. So what kind of connection can be made between the learning experience and then their own lives? So metacognition or something else that they know. The second P is pick it apart. So break it down and talk about what they personally learned from the activity. What did they learn from the lesson? And what do they now know? And you could ask a follow-up. What do they wish they did know that they didn't learn from it? And then your last one, your third one, would be plan to use. So now that you've understood what it is that you learn, how are you going to use this in your experiences in the future? So that's just a basic protocol of how you could take it to that next level. So these examples of prompts I've given to you can be used very individually or personally, where students are reflecting in a personal journal. They're creating using a Google Doc and writing it on there. They're creating a video vlog, and so where they are using Flipgrid to speak into and make a video of what it is that they learned from that. So this is very personal. The second strategy is making this more of a class, so expanding it to the class, and this can be done with group discussion. So what this would look like is the teacher, or maybe a student or something of that nature, would get up and ask the prompts that they want to ask, and then this kicks off a discussion where people are feeding off one another. A really good way to do this is actually to combine the written part and this group discussion part. So in other words, have students write individually some responses to the prompts, and that way they're going to have more material when they go to share in the discussion, because they've given some thought, they've written things out. And so you could flip this over into a group discussion where the class is discussing what they learned. And so what you're seeing is people feeding off one another. I learned this. Oh, I learned that too. Or, oh, no, I didn't learn that. And so you're seeing a lot of back and forth, a lot of give and take. And what you're going to do is the students are then going to kind of continue to go with each other into thinking even deeper and deeper and deeper. And they can ask questions as well. It doesn't have to be just the person running the discussion. So group discussion is a second way that you could do reflection. A third way that you could do it is there are lots of strategies that you could use that involve just students together. And so what you see here are 15 different strategies where students are partnering up with someone, and they're having they're having the reflection that way. And so what this might look like is a sentence stem-based response, where you put students together in a group or a pair or whatever, and you give them like, what I learned from this project was ... and then they fill in the blank, and then that kind of gets their discussion. A jigsaw would be, that they're taking different aspects. So this person got this, person got this, but this person got this, and they're putting it all together into one picture of what it was. It could be, they're just a brainstorming, where they're brainstorming out loud. It could be pair share, where they get together just with a partner and they talk about what they learned. And that can be taken a step further into think square, where they're getting together 4 people and talking about what they learned. And then you want to kick it up even to another level. You can have think pair share, where when they talk with someone else about what they learned, then they go to another group and they share that with others, or the other person shares what the other person learned. And so those are ways to take kind of the student to student reflection and take it to the next level. So I've given you 3 ways that you can set it up, whether it be individual, whether it be led by the teacher, or whether it be student to student. But the fourth thing I want to talk about is then the use of protocols. What I have found with reflection, especially when students are just starting out, and if you want to establish your classroom environment where reflection is just part of the process, then you need to give them some protocols to form what it is that they're doing. So it kind of leads them through the reflection, especially at first. So an example of this would be this: what, so what, now what? So when you have students either write down or share with others, or as a group discussion, you're asking them what first. They're asking, where it's basically you're making sure the students are just giving what actually happened. No opinion, no thoughts, just what actually happened. The so what then would be going from descriptive to interpretive. So what did they think about what it is that happened? What were the feelings involved? What was the meaning of experience for each participant? And then lastly is the now what, and this is taking it to the next step. This is seeing the context of what this is. It's applying the lessons to new situations and so on and so forth. So this would be an example of one protocol that can be used. A couple ones that are kind of fun protocols that are for kinesthetic learners is I use one called the Snapshot Protocol. And so what I tell students is I want them to take one thing that went well and make a snapshot of what that looked like. And so they would be in groups, and then they would form a pose in the picture of when something went well. So they might have students that are doing a really good job presenting, or students that are having success. Then I'd say take your second picture is going to be what went wrong. And so students then would demonstrate that in a snapshot. So they're still, the whole picture is worth 1,000 words. And so it might be that there was a student that was goofing off, or it might be that things did not work as I planned. And then the last thing is, the last snapshot is what did you most get from this? And again, this is kind of scaffolding up to get students to think about what is it that I learned from this. And I always tell them it doesn't have to be academic in nature. It could be other things that you learned. And so students may have learned that they work really well together, or that they don't work really well together, and that's something they need to work on. So what they come up with is their own, but it's really important to them because that's what they learn. A second simple protocol that students could do is what I call the fortune cookie protocol. So if you don't want students to have to write like whole, paragraphs, or you just want to keep it simple, the fortune cookie protocol asks students to sum up in one sentence of wisdom what is that they learned. So the fortune cookie protocol might be like, he who goofs off gets a bad grade, or something of that nature, or working together, everyone can accomplish more. So those would be examples of, and so the challenge is students have to fit it into one sentence, and they also have to make it fortune cookie like, so it allows them to be creative. So those are just some examples. But whatever reflection that you use, whatever methods you use, it's important that you do this throughout. So it's not just done, once every 9 weeks or whatever, but at the end of a lesson, you guys are reflecting. It could be a small reflection, or if you have a very large project, it could be a larger reflection. But you're taking the time after learning has taken place to reflect upon what students got out of that. And so you have to be able to set that up in your classroom, and so that students, towards the end of the year, you don't need those prompts. You don't need those protocols. Students are just going to be reflective. So you could just ask and tell them to reflect, and they will be able to come up with things because they have kind of learned how to do that through you setting it up in your classroom as part of the environment.